Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Lillahi ta'ala. Correct your intentions. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. وَالْحَرَامُ رِزْقٌ, and the forbidden is provision. The forbidden is provision or sustenance. The forbidden is sustenance, or the forbidden is provision. So that's very literal translation. And what he means is, any provision that is forbidden is still called provision. It's being forbidden does not take it out of being, it's being forbidden does not take it out of being provision from God, provision from God. SharH, the explanation. أن الرزق ليس مقصورا على الحلال, is that provision or sustenance is not limited to the lawful. بل يشمل الحلال والحرام. Rather, it includes the lawful and the unlawful. وإن كان بينهما فرق من حيث العاقبة. Although, or even if there is a difference between them in terms of consequences. فإن الرزق الحلال ليس فيه وبال على صاحبه. For indeed, lawful sustenance is not a calamity for the one who has it. وأما الحرام, and as for the forbidden, فإنه وبال على صاحبه, it is indeed a calamity for whoever has it. قال الإمام علي, Imam Ali said, الدنيا حلالها حساب وحرامها عقاب. The worldly life, it's lawful. The lawful of it is hisab. I don't know how to explain hisab here in this context. As if it says, the worldly life or the earthly life, its lawful is a reckoning, or like an account. I'm not really sure how to direct the translation there so that it makes sense to me. And it's forbidden. The forbidden of this dunya is torture or punishment. قال التفتزاني, التفتزاني said, لأن الرزق اسم لما يسوقه الله تعالى إلى الحيوان من إنسان وغيره كالجن والبهائم. This is because rizq, sustenance or provision, is a name for something, is what you call something that God, exalted is He, drives towards the living creature, whether human or otherwise, such as a genie, such as genies and animals. فَيَأْكُلُهُ, and then this living creature will consume it. And consuming here is not limited to eating. Consuming here means to benefit from it, to exhaust it. وَذَلِكَ قَدْ يَكُونُ حَلَالًا وَقَدْ يَكُونُ حَرَامًا, and that could be, might possibly be lawful, or it might possibly be unlawful. وَهَذَا أَوْلَى مِنْ تَفْسِيرِهِ بِمَا يَتَغَذَّى بِهِ الْحَيَوَانِ, and this is better than explaining rizq, sustenance or provision, as, than defining it as that which nourishes the living creature. The definition given for provision here, which is what Allah drives towards the living creature and He thus consumes it, or He thus exhausts it, whether lawful or unlawful. This is better than defining it as Let me back up. Let me repeat from here. وهذا أولى من تفسيره بما يتغذى به الحيوان. And this, meaning the definition we just gave for rizq, R-I-Z-Q, rizq, this definition is better. What is this definition that's better? To say rizq is what you call what God drives towards the living creature, and the living creature thus exhausts it. Consumes it means exhausts it. This is better, whether lawful or unlawful. This is better than defining rizq, provision or sustenance, as ما يتغذى به الحيوان, that which nourishes, that by which the living creature is nourished. لخلوه عن معنى الإضافة إلى الله تعالى. Because this definition is devoid of attributing the sustenance to God. Yani, the definition we started with right here is sustenance is what God is defined as, what God drives towards the living creature, and the living creature thus exhausts it, consumes it. The second definition is rizq is that which nourishes the living creature. So when you say it that way, then you took God out of the definition. Yani, you took attributing this to God out of the definition. Exalted is he, مع أنه معتبر في مفهوم الرزق. Although what is understood from rizq does regard that it comes from God. It's like, what he's saying is, it's like the word rizq does intrinsically imply that it comes from God. It's like coming from God is built into the meaning of rizq. So to define it in a way that doesn't mention God is not a better definition. وَعِنْدَ الْمُعْتَزِلَةِ الْحَرَامُ لَيْسَ بِرِزْقٍ. And according to the Mu'tazilah, the forbidden is not at all sustenance. لأنهم فسروه تارة بمملوك يأكله المالك وتارة بما لا يمنع عن الانتفاع به. Because they define it in one of two ways. The Mu'tazila would sometimes define rizq as a possession consumed by its possessor. Yani, an owner, an owned thing, something owned, consumed by its owner. And sometimes they would define it as that which is not barred from being useful. That which is not barred from being useful. So let me say again. According to the Mu'tazila, the haram is not at all rizq, sustenance or provision, because they interpreted it, they defined it sometimes as an ownership consumed by its owner, an owned thing consumed by its owner, or a possession consumed by its possessor. And sometimes they defined it as what is not forbidden from being used. Sometimes they define rizq as what is not forbidden from being used. وَذَلِكَ لَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا حَلَالًا. And yani, either way, according to either definition they might give, then it has to only be lawful. So according to them, rizq is never haram. Meaning what they're saying is anything that's haram is not rizq. ولكن يلزم على الأول ألا يكون ما يأكله الدواب رزقا. However, and what's the problem with their definitions here? It is binding from their first definition that what the animals consume would not be rizq. Why? Because according to their first definition, rizq is something owned, and the animals don't own anything. So if rizq is defined as a possession or an ownership, then that means the animals don't have any rizq. And here's footnote. This is contrary to the ayah. وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. There is no creature that traverses the face of the earth, but that its provision is on God. Okay. So that goes against this ayah, meaning this ayah informs us that every creature that traverses the face of the earth or creeps over the face of the earth, its provision is on God. So this means that the animals do have provision, rizq. It's explicit in the ayah. Illa ala Allahi rizquha. Its rizq, very explicitly stated there, is on God. So the animals then, this is ayah 6 of Surah Hud. So the animals then, they have rizq. So then it's not valid to define rizq as an ownership, because defining it that way would deny that the animals have rizq, because the animals don't have any ownership. So that definition is faulty. وعلى الوجه الثاني أن من أكل الحرام طول عمره لم يرزقه الله تعالى أصلا. And according to their second definition, what's wrong with it? Anyone who has consumed the forbidden for all of his life, meaning anyone who has never had anything lawful, which is possible. It's possible that a person has never had anything lawful. His house could be haram. His clothing could be haram. His food is haram. Everything has haram. The woman he has, not his wife, for example. Everything he has is haram. Then, if that's the case, according to their definition, lam yarzuquhu Allahu ta'ala asla, then God never even provided for him fundamentally. And that's still against the ayah we recited, the one in Surah Hud, because the human is a dabba, a creature that traverses the face of the earth. وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. There is no dabba in the earth, no creature that crawls. There's no creeping creature or crawling creature. There's no creature that traverses the face of the earth, that includes humans, but that its rizq is on God. So then these definitions are faulty. They are debunked and disproven. Intaha, end quote. We were quoting at Taftazani. ومؤدى كلام المعتزلة فاسد ظاهر الفساد, or ظاهر الفساد. And so what the talk of the Mu'tazila leads to is corrupt, obviously corrupt. And I'll remind you, why are they talking about this? This is still based on their denial of destiny. This is one of the offshoots from denying destiny. Remember, what are some of the offshoots, the offshoot cases, the derivative cases of denying destiny? One is believing that creatures create their own actions. Two is believing that you have the ability to do something before you do it. Three is believing that you create, that the creature creates what results from his action, like the domino effect we talked about. They believe that because they create their own actions, that when they tip over the first domino, that's their creation, the falling of that domino, and then every domino that falls after that is their creation. And this one also, which is to believe that sustenance is only lawful. If that's not connecting for you, how does what we're talking about in terms of sustenance being halal or haram stem from denying destiny? If it's not clear for you, then you think about it and ponder and review your lessons. Inshallah, will become clear for you. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, وكل يستوفي رزق نفسه حلالا كان أو حراما, and all fulfills his own sustenance. Each individual exhausts his own sustenance, lawful, be it lawful or unlawful. SharH, the explanation. أي لحصول التغذي بهما جميعا كما دل عليه حديث الحاكم والبيهقي وغيرهما. The explanation is that this is true because the nourishment takes place in either case, whether the issue is lawful or unlawful. So every individual exhausts his own sustenance, whether it's lawful or unlawful, as proven by the hadith of Al-Hakim and Al-Bayhaqi and others. إِنَّ رُوحَ الْقُدْسِ نَفَثَ فِي رُوعِي. Indeed, the Holy Soul, that's Gabriel, Angel Gabriel, may peace be upon him, he blew into my heart, أَنَّ نَفْسًا لَن تَمُوتَ حَتَّى تَسْتَكْمِلَ رِزْقَهَا, that no soul shall die before completing, before exhausting all of its sustenance. That means each creature's sustenance is written for it. So you won't die before your record is done, is completed. Like if that record were a checklist, you're not going to die before the last one is checked off. No soul dies until it completes its sustenance. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَجْمِلُوا فِي الطَّلَبِ. So, fear God and seek your sustenance from the appropriate channels. Subhanallah. قال المؤلف رحمه الله ولا يتصور ألا يأكل إنسان رزقه أو يأكل غيره رزقه. And it is inconceivable that a human would not consume his sustenance, or that someone else would consume his sustenance. Anything that is your sustenance, you will consume it. It's not possible that there's something that is your sustenance and you're not going to consume it. Even in the future. Nor that someone else would consume his sustenance. SharH, the explanation. المراد بالأكل هنا الانتفاع على الوجه المعتاد. The intent here by consumption, what's intended by consumption here is benefiting, using. What's intended by consumption here is using in a normal way. من أكل المأكول ولبس الملبوس ونحو ذلك, whether it means eating the edible and wearing the clothing. I tried to make my translation match how nice the Arabic is. It's not able, it seems. Whether you ate what's eaten, min akli al-ma'kul, whether eating the eaten, eating food, وَلُبْسِ الْمَلْبُوس, or wearing the worn, yani wearing your clothes, وَنَحْوِ ذَلِكَ, and the like, all of that, meaning you're wearing your clothes is called in Arabic akl. The first thing that might come to your mind from the word akl is eating. So someone might translate, maybe you'd see a translation of this Nasafi text, and someone would translate it as, it is inconceivable that a human would not eat his sustenance. I'm using the word consume because it's a little bit broader than eating, which is the intent. أما إن لوحظ في الرزق معنى الملك, as for if the meaning of ownership is attached to rizq, لكن بدون التقيد بانتفاع الشخص به على هذا الوجه المذكور فلا يصح هذا الكلام. Okay, so Shaykh says, however, if the meaning of ownership is incorporated into rizq, like if you were to say, this is my sustenance, and what you mean is this is something I own, then this, you'd be using the word rizq devoid of the meaning of using it. What we're saying is this religious meaning of rizq is that it's something you use. If what we're saying is, if you own something but you never consume it, and then you died without ever using it or benefiting from it in any way, then it's not your rizq. It was your ownership, but it wasn't your rizq because you didn't exhaust it. So the Shaykh is saying, if someone were to use rizq with the meaning of ownership, therefore stripping it from the meaning of using it, then what we are saying is not true. What are we saying? We're saying it is inconceivable that a human would not consume his rizq, or that someone else would consume his rizq. That's inconceivable. Shaykh is telling us this sentence here is true when rizq means what you used and consumed and exhausted, even if you don't own it. But if you were to use the word rizq with the meaning of ownership, then this sentence is not applicable. The Shaykh says, because the human being, he might own something, and it could be, yani, his, let's say. That's a little rough translation there. But then he would die and leave it for someone else. كما قال القائل, just as a poet said, قد يجمع المال غير آكله ويأكل المال غير من جمع. This means it could be that other than the one who consumes some money is the one who accumulated it. And other than the one who accumulated the money is the one who consumes it. That's a line of poetry. So that is not our base for defining rizq. We are defining rizq as what the creature uses and exhausts and consumes, even if he doesn't own it, and even if it's haram. وَإِلَى هَذَا أَشَارَ التَّفْتَزَانِيُّ بِقَوْلِهِ. And at this, you said, who says that poem? Shaykh didn't say who said it. He said, and this is common. He said here, كَمَا قَالَ الْقَائِلُ, as the sayer said, and that's it. Who's the sayer? He didn't say. And there's not even a footnote here. And that's very common, that the scholars would cite a line of Arabic poetry without citing its author. Sorry? Why would they do that? It would be because the line of poetry is confirmed. Think about it like, let's say, in popular culture, pop culture, they say today, these days. Aren't there things people know, like when you say it, like a line that you'd say, you don't have to say, yeah. Like, take some known lyrics. Maybe there's some known lyrics. Good, alhamdulillah. Like maybe there's famous lyrics to a song or something people know, so they would quote it. Okay. And that's useful. You need to know that. We actually talked about that in some previous lessons. In particular, I'm not going to go far here, just to remind you though, if you were to cite a line of poetry while you discussed, not Hadith of the Slave Girl, Istiwa. If you discussed Istiwa with a Wahhabi, and then you brought up a line of poetry, and then he says something to you, then you might say, no, it's not the case. So anyway, review your lessons there too. وَإِلَى هَذَا أَشَارَ التَّفْتَزَانِيُّ بِقَوْلِهِ. التَّفْتَزَانِي signaled to this by saying, لأن ما قدره الله تعالى غذاء لشخص يجب أن يأكله ويمتنع أن يأكله غيره. He said, because whatever God, exalted is He, has preordained to be the nutrients, some person's nutrients, then it is necessary that he will consume it. And it is impossible that someone else will consume it based on the preordainment of God. وَأَمَّا بِمَعْنَى الْمِلْكِ فَلَا يَمْتَنِعْ. But with the meaning of ownership, if you're using rizq with the meaning of ownership, then it's not impossible by this consideration that you would not consume your sustenance or that someone else would consume your sustenance. Intaha. The Shaykh says, it's witnessed that a person might refrain from using something that came into his possession but is owned by someone else. And then that other one would still benefit from it. وأراد التفتزاني بذلك الرد على المعتزلة الذين شرطوا في الرزق الملكية كما سبق. And what at-Taftazani means to do here is to refute the Mu'tazila who make it a condition for something to be rizq that it is ownership. It's not a condition. So what are we saying here? We're saying in terms of Aqidah, we're not going to define rizq, sustenance or provision as ownership. Because if it were ownership by definition, then it means that the animals don't have any rizq. But it is, we're not denying that it's possible to use the word rizq with the meaning of ownership. It's possible to use it in this way, but using it in this way is not a condition. Using rizq with the meaning of ownership is not a condition. And in fact, when we want to talk in terms of Aqidah, it's rejected. It's actually rejected. So that we don't contradict the ayah that tells us that the rizq of every creature that traverses the face of Allah is on God. The rizq of every creature that traverses the face of the earth is on God. As previously mentioned. Do you have any question? Let me see what's going on here. Okay. Any question here? I'm concerned maybe some of it was slightly confusing. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So there are some people who still use the word rizq as an ownership?
Let's say here, it's possible to use it that way. It's not, impossible. It's not going to be blasphemy, for example, or we don't have to like argue with him and debate with him if he were to use the word rizq with the meaning of ownership.
But be careful when you use it in the terms of Aqidat.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I want to know. I understand anything. Yes.
I mean, wafikum. Yani, like, really, we're going to avoid that. Because for us, the creed of Ahlus Sunnah is our base. We want to talk like in accordance with the Aqidah of Ahlus Sunnah. The Aqidah of Ahlus Sunnah is that Al-Haramu rizq, the forbidden is rizq. And everyone will consume and exhaust his rizq, whether it's lawful or unlawful. And it is inconceivable that a human would not consume his rizq, or that someone else would consume his rizq. Yeah, and when you have that creed, then makes some things easier for you, makes patience and forbearance easier for you when there's something maybe it's not in your grasp. And if Allah willed for it to be in your grasp, it shall be in your grasp. No escape. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.